Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. We are so excited today because we are continuing the conversation on structural care. And it was a hot topic last year and it continues to be a hot topic this year. What is it, and how do you make sure that your nonprofit organization is embedding structural care into its organizational life? Well, I have my co host here, Peter Blakely and Rebecca Tuttle. How are you?
Good morning. Good, thank you.
I realized that we didn't play the jingle, and everybody knows I love that jingle.
Want me to play it?
Let's play the
Do it.
jingle, and then we'll get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi, everyone. I really love that jingle. Okay, so we want to welcome our listeners, and if you are listening, please put your name and tell us where you're from in the chat. It's always nice to hear where people are listening from. Also, we want to welcome our Australian listeners. Thank you for having us and for listening to our show. So, we've been talking about structural care, and structural care is something that Peter brought up last year when we had a show called I'm Mad About Self-Care. And so we've had several conversations this year. We had one last year, and we've had several this year because it's a serious topic. And now that we are in our quote unquote new normal, we have engaged in a different way of working. And so I lost my train of thought. Okay, so embedding structural care is now important because COVID or the way we were working is no longer temporary. It is what it is. So last week, what we did was that we gave you actual strategies that you could use in your organization. Some of them are budget neutral and some of them will cost you. But Rebecca was able to give us some insight into how to get some funding. We didn't finish that conversation. So we're going to continue our conversation on strategies for structural care. And first, I'm going to recap what we learned last week, and then Peter's gonna start us off with the next one in line. But let's recap on what we talked about in terms of techniques. So we started with removing the shaming around taking breaks. Leaders should model this behavior and create an organization that endorses breaks and doesn't make people feel like, oh my God, I can't take a break because my manager never does. Helping employees who work remotely create a workspace in their home. Even 2 years in, we still have employees that may not have a dedicated space. And a lot of this, believe it or not, is because many of us never imagined working from home, right? So you have to check in with your employees. Do they need a printer? It may have been okay that they didn't have a printer when we thought we would be away until September of 2020, but it's January of 2022. And so it's about time to think, if this is a permanent thing, what do our employees need? Having no meeting zones, dedicating a day, a part of the day, where there are no meetings, so that your staff can get their work done. Let's be very conscious of the meetings that we're hosting. Setting up Zoom calls as phone conference calls. Zoom has become really natural to us, but we are still in people's living rooms. And preparing for a Zoom meeting takes extra steps. Also, we're looking at ourselves and we're looking at our space all day, and that's not good. So I want one thing we could start doing is thinking about, can we convert some of these Zoom calls into phone conference calls, right? Where people don't have their video on, but they're still in the Zoom platform and you're still having conversation, but you're not worried about everything around you. It really helps the mind. And then the last thing we talked about, and this was a hot topic among us, is increasing pay. You cannot expect your employees to be healthy and have great well-being and mental health if they're struggling financially. And I still hear today nonprofits say the words, "We can't pay more." And so we encourage leaders to rethink that model and really reach out to your funders or really talk to your board of directors and think about increasing pay. So those were the five that we got through. Peter, maybe we should start with again defining structural care versus self care, and then I pass it to you.
Sure. The the conversation about structural, hang on, is that me? I was getting a little bit of a reverberation. So the conversation started because I said, when we're asking people to self-care their way out of stressful, traumatic situations, we're putting the burden on the individual, right, to make themselves whole. And we set ourselves up for this whole kind of self-care guilt thing when it's not enough, right? And that we need to actually think bigger and think, what are the systems that are creating this environment where people are so tired or so stressed, right? And that's where we started to have the conversation about structural care. How can we create structures that take care of people as opposed to creating structures that stress and exhaust people and then asking the people to somehow compensate for that in their other free time?
I love
So
that.
that's how the conversation got started.
Yeah. So let's jump to number 6. Peter, take us there.
Number 6 is looking at our job descriptions, especially if the location or the job itself has changed. One of the things that we have talked about is how how organizations and people have adapted. But one of the things, Cynthia, you've really talked about is that people are pitching in according to their abilities, not necessarily limiting themselves to their jobs and their job descriptions. So this might be a good time to really take out our job descriptions and use them as living documents and make adjustments where needed.
Yeah, I think also when we were doing research for the show, this idea of job descriptions, a lot of them, if they haven't been updated, were really geared toward the office environment. And so does it still make sense? Do the expectations still make sense? Are the responsibilities making sense? And does your staff need some training on this new way of working? So if we still have the same expectations, such as supervising staff. So managers have to supervise staff, right? And so that's going to remain in the job description. However, in reviewing it, you may see that your manager needs some training on how to supervise remote staff, right? So making sure that you have reviewed the job description. It doesn't exactly translate, right, Peter, from the office to the home. It's not like you
No,
swap these people and put them in the home and the job is exactly the same.
right.
Yeah.
No, it's not the same. You have to think about what were you doing in the physical space, like walking around the office and saying good morning to everybody, that you have to replace in the virtual space, and how do those time constraints change? And some of us are just running entirely different programs now than we were
Yeah.
before, right? Because of increased demands, because of some of the financial strains around the pandemic. A lot of organizations are short-staffed.
Mhm.
currently. So people might just be picking up odds and ends that are not in their job description.
Mhm.
So, like, let's have that explicit and on the table.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that falls under the other duties not identified right now category.
Stuff we haven't thought of yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I notice is, some people, I think it has to do with cognitive style and things like that. Some people do a good job of understanding their job description and how what they're doing relates to it. I think there are other people who barely read the job description when they were interviewing for the job, and certainly a year later have completely forgotten about it. They're just kind of doing what comes at them or what seems to need doing. So creating a kind of discipline around reviewing those and looking at them is probably useful to a lot of people.
Yes. Yes. All right.
I
Yes.
just want to welcome Catherine to the show. She's watching us this morning. I'm going to type in the chat. Welcome, Catherine. Time Mastermind.
Okay, let's go into the next slide.
Rebecca?
Hi.
Yeah.
Number 7 is let your employees choose where they want to work. Is it from home? Is it at the office, or a hybrid approach? I love this one because a lot of employers had shut down and then they slowly open, but they're still maintaining that hybrid approach where some are in the office some days, others are out of the office. But having that flexibility, I think it does a couple of things. It makes us think twice. I think you had suggested, Cynthia, about a checklist. Is this meeting necessary in person, or can it be something that's done remotely? So that really maximizes efficiency, creates a safe space for people, and also helps reassure them that if they still are concerned about COVID and everything, that they don't have to be there 40, 50, 60 hours a week like we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I actually know an organization that is embedding this practice. And I had a long conversation with them because I thought it was interesting. And there are many that are doing this, but this had been the first time I had heard of it, where they developed 3 ways of working: home, remote, and hybrid. And they rebuilt their office, and they built an entire structure or designed the office to fit that your work style. And so when you work from home, you don't have an office, and if you need to come into the office, then you have what they call a hotel suite. I think it's called the hotel desk, where you get a table and you bring your laptop. And for the hybrid, you have a table, right? But you also have like a filing cabinet that gets locked that you get to keep your stuff. And if you want to come to the office every day, you have an actual office. And I thought, wow, what a great idea. Talk about, flexibility, not shaming anyone. They redesigned their policies, right? And so there are some meetings that you have to come into the office. There are very few though. And so that becomes part of the new way of working. No shame around the choice that you're making. It is 100% optional, and for the exception of just a handful where the people have to be there. Obviously, your maintenance person has to be on site. So, well, they think obviously that person, and also the front desk. But I thought this was a great idea.
It's like an incubator space for small business. It's very,
Yes.
very similar.
I think there are some people who don't want to work at home. I love working at home. I have a hard time imagining it. But there are people who are like, no, I want to go someplace else and have my work stuff happen outside of my home. And when I'm home, I want to be home, right? I think the future of work, though, is those people are going to have vouchers to go to any co-working space
Yeah.
in their region, right? And we'll have offices that are like hubs. A bunch of insurance companies will get together and open an insurance hub, and various insurance industry workers will work at that hub in their region, but it will not necessarily be near the headquarters of their specific companies.
Yeah. I think you're right. And so you talked about that you would, if you had the choice, let's say you were working for a company that was not yours, you would work from home. I would choose hybrid.
Me
I,
too.
I miss the office some days. I woke up today missing the office. And I do like working from home. I really do. But I also miss the interaction. Rebecca, what would you choose?
I just dropped something. I'm sorry.
Which one would you choose if you worked at a company that was not yours? Would you work from home, hybrid, or at the office?
I would choose hybrid because I think it's really important. I'm much more productive working in my home studio than in the office. You have less disruption, from people swinging by the office, which is fine, but I think I'm more productive, especially since I have to really be enclosed to do my best writing. But the hybrid model allows us to check in with people, kind of get out of our space of the four walls that we're in, and that commute time, might listen to podcasts, might listen to the radio, just kind of seeing the sights outside of the house is really, it's a lot more fun now that
you have to be kind of thoughtful about going outside of your house.
Yeah.
It's one big advantage to going to the office is you build relationships a lot faster, right? You can build your relationships with people more quickly in the office. So one concern would be if some people go to the office and other people never go to the office. How do you manage equality in those relationships, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of conversations about that. And if you're a leader listening to the show, there's definitely research that has been done to that regard. How do you engage employees who you never see, especially if there are some that you do see?
Yeah.
And so making sure that there's some equity in that relationship building.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go to the next one. I had something to say, but I forgot. Oh my
I'll
God.
come back to it.
Yeah. Develop a culture that uses temporary help to support employees. So, one of the things that the literature is saying is that this new way of working and then adapting programs is also leading to employees having more work on their plate because they're also doing more learning. They have had to adjust, and a lot of times they're still being held to the outcomes that were set forth by the funder, and in terms of service delivery. And so we want to make sure that leaders are paying attention to employees' workload. And a lot of nonprofits, and it's the beauty of the culture, right? We like to roll up our sleeves. We're all mission driven. We usually believe in the mission and the values of the organization. So if my colleague is, overstretched, I chip in. But what that does often in an organization is that it ignores the problem. And the problem is that we need to review the workload. We need to review the structure. We need to review job descriptions and build a culture where we bring in people to help the staff and not so much just expect staff to do more.
And you have to build that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you have to build that time in because oftentimes, especially in nonprofits, it's go, 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 crisis, crisis, crisis. You have to really build that time in to be able to stop and do that work. And maybe that's the piece, that's the hybrid piece. We go in to do that reflection, to do that employee supportiveness piece. I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is really interesting. So many organizations are super reluctant to use temporary help. I think this is a discipline issue, right? I mean, if I can articulate clearly enough which tasks a temp can do, right? So tasks that don't require really deep organizational knowledge or a whole lot of context, right? And commit to paying for it. What's good about this is you're only committing temporarily to paying for it, but it's really going to push managers to think hard about their job descriptions and whether they make sense, right?
I
So
misunderstood what you meant
discipline.
by temporary. I thought you meant put in place some temporary supports for employees. I didn't realize
Mm.
you were talking about using
I
actual.
thought you meant temporary people.
I misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's temporary people.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I read this, I thought about, there are other industries where temporary help is just part of the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
My mother worked for the post office, and if you were a
Mhm.
temp, you were called a casual
Yes.
worker, right?
Yep.
There are some industries where they refer to their temps as floaters because they float from position to position. But I have to tell you, I have, and this has become more common as I work with organizations, but I know one recently, they lost their executive director and half their staff got COVID. And the people who were not sick were picking up the slack for everyone who was out. That
Right.
is not a good system.
It's not fair. It's not
It is
okay on them,
right.
right? No.
Yeah.
And this is the moment to leverage all the infrastructure, all the work from home infrastructure. Is there somebody who really only wants to work 4 hours a day, from home?
Yeah.
And, maybe if your organization has to make a whole lot of phone calls or do a whole lot of data entry, somebody would love to do that from their house. And
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And
Now's the time to
imagine
think more
bringing
flexibly.
in, sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
Now's the time to think more flexibly about,
Yeah.
who works for your organization. Yeah.
Imagine bringing in someone who gets trained in many roles and
Mhm.
can serve as that floater as we need them. So really thinking outside
Yeah.
the box, I think is what that strategy is
Very smart.
encouraging leaders to do.
Mhm.
Peter,
Let's shut down. I think that's a great idea. We did it, right? We did it this
yeah,
summer. We realized that we needed a break and we actually shut down coffee time for a couple of months, so that we could all take a break at the same time and
yeah.
not just, shift the load around.
Mhm.
I think a lot more organizations have been doing it, have been like closing down around the holidays. Um, I'm living here in Richmond. The school district was closed several days for mental health days because teachers just couldn't really take it anymore. And so they took
Wow.
mental health days. I think it's really smart. Um, when you have one person taking time off, other people are still sending them emails or just holding off tasks to give them tomorrow, right? The
Yeah.
only way to like really breathe and reflect is if everybody takes a break at the same time. I think it's a really good idea. And your
Yeah.
community is going to understand if you're gone for a few days.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You would build that in
Yeah.
to the practice.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you unmuted. I didn't know if you had something you wanted to add.
No, I was just it's a little loud with the cars, so
Oh,
just waiting to do the next slide.
Oh yeah. I really want to do the next one. This is huge.
okay, okay. But I do want to say I loved this strategy because it's what Peter's saying. And so if I go on vacation, I come back to 300 emails. Someone told me the other day recently that it takes them 3 weeks to actually
Mhm.
get back to where they were before the vacation. And I thought, oh my, that is just
Makes you
so,
not want to take a vacation.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
unfair. If the
Yeah.
whole organization shuts down, if you can do that, and so you would build in, you know, infrastructure to take care of the people that you're serving while you're shut down. But if everyone takes off, we're not coming back to 300 emails. We might come back to 20 because the rest of the world is open, but we're not coming back to 300.
Right.
So I love that one. Okay, next one. You guys are excited.
Mhm.
All right. So getting feedback from your employees, and then more importantly, doing something about it or something with it. I think
Yeah.
if we have employees who are, let's just say, bold enough to really give suggestions for the organization, they feel that they can confidently make recommendations, and that you're truly creating a space for them to do that, then you have to honor their um, courage to do so by doing something about it and taking those comments and that feedback and making improvements, making the changes that people are clearly asking you for. I love this one. I really think this is important.
Yeah, and I think there are two hard steps to this. One is get actual feedback, and that's tough. Um, and then to be like willing to follow through. So one of the things I tell people when they're designing a survey or some kind of a data collection methodology is try not to ask about things if you can't do anything about it.
Yes, thank you, Peter.
It's not it's not helpful to distribute a survey and have everybody say we need a raise and then just say, well, we can't do that. That's not
Right.
gonna happen. I mean, now everybody's just frustrated and
Yeah.
doesn't feel listened to, right? So
Yes.
I
No,
remember you. Oh, I'm sorry, Cynthia.
no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Rebecca.
I was just saying, I remember a conversation that you had led us on, PETA, in a previous episode about the importance of surveys, but also their function. If you ask questions that your response options are what the organization wants to hear, that's not really an intentional survey.
right.
I remember. So
Right.
I think we should do another show on surveys, on getting feedback and returning
Yeah, we
that.
should. Yeah. And I mean, surveys are obviously not the only way to get feedback. I think a lot of organizations do it because they think it's going to be faster and they think anonymity is important. I often say, like, wait, maybe we should think about why you think your staff needs anonymity, right? To tell you these things, because that tells you something about your organizational culture right there. But also, maybe the survey is really just going to tell you what you already know.
Yeah.
And what's important is the next steps where you engage in some like creative problem solving with people.
Yeah, yeah. And remember why you're doing it, right? So if you're doing it to embed structural care, then it's what Peter said. Do ask about the things you can do, right? You don't have to, and so you don't have to make follow through with all of the recommendations because people will come out with really good, but some of them are going to be out of the box. But follow up also means responding to what we can do, what we cannot do, and why, right? So that employees understand that their feedback is still valuable. And
Every
then,
kind of communication matters. So even when you're distributing a survey, think before you distribute the survey about your communication plan for the results, right?
yeah,
Try to be able to tell people like this is how long it's going to take us to analyze the results, and
yeah,
this is how we're going to tell you about the results, right?
yeah,
So, so that it doesn't just go into a void. A lot of times people will expect the turnaround to be instant, which it's not. It might take you weeks or months to analyze the results. So just say that. Just say it's complicated and it's going to take a while, right?
yeah,
Rather than have people have an unreasonable expectation.
yes,
So, and another thing is one of the things that we've talked about with respect to structural care is it's not about making everything fair and equal. So you really might want to interpret your survey results differently, right? Surveys tend to be good for generating averages. If your average employee says, no, I don't need a whole lot of rest. Yeah, working 50 hours a week is fine, right? But some people are saying that's not okay, right? That's not all right. That does not necessarily mean that you're going to go with the average, right? This might be the case where you're going to do something because it is needed,
Yeah.
just to give everybody what they need.
Yes, yes. I love that. I love that. Well, we are at the 30-minute mark. The good news is we got through the last five, so that was really cool. Again, these are amazing, amazing techniques. Some are budget neutral, some is about really paying attention, but really begin to think about how to embed structural care into your nonprofits. So next week, we will continue the conversation. We thank you for listening and have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.